Welcome Wanderer to the best starter in patch 040. There have been tons of changes to Ascendancy skills and more, and I compiled everything in one neat and nifty list. Plus, I'll add tons of in-game insights for better visualization. We get every note for the Shaman and the Oracle, and we'll go over it at the end of the video. We will begin with the Pathfinder, which get massively buffed. The first thing they did is they removed Contagious Contamination. The most damaging poison spreads when an enemy dies. However, this means that we can now faster get into overwhelming toxicity, which gives us double the stacks of poison, instead of now having to wait for the second ascension if I play a poison build. On first ascension, bam, right away, super poisons. And missing Contagious Contamination can be simply offset by using the Herald of Plague. They are sadly removing practical remedies, and this could give you immune to freeze. But they're buffing Running Assault. You can't be heavy stunned while sprinting. This does not change much for your early game because we need 1, 2, 3, 4 points to get to Running Assault. However, it says 50% less speed penalty from using skills while moving, which is very good for a lot of crossbow builds, for example, as you're shooting and moving and reloading and shooting, and it will just make you zoom over maps. The real interesting thing they added are the last twos. That would be Path of the Warrior and Path of the Sword. This is going to be a new selective node before Traveler's Wisdom, and Traveler's Wisdom is also reworked. With Path of the Warrior, you can start allocating passive points from here, and with Path of the Sword, you can start allocating passive points from up there too, which means we get easy access to all 3 layers of the passive tree as a Pathfinder for whatever build you're planning. On top, Path of the Warrior / Sword adds another 4 passive points, and then afterwards, you can go into Traveler's Wisdom. Traveler's Wisdom changes how attribute nodes work. Instead of choosing Intelligence, Dexterity, or Strength, you can now also choose 5% increased damage or defense instead of those attributes. Now increased is only additive and not multiplicative. However, my current build has 30 into Mage, 30 Dexterity, and 40 Strength. These I could easily respec into damage, or defense. This makes Pathfinder extremely versatile. However, I will add my Poison Grenade Pathfinder in the description below, as that was so good, and we're getting many new passive nodes that might boost poison even further. Next up, we get the Deadeye, the #1 chosen ascendancy in the last patch. I myself played an explosive shot Deadeye that's now even stronger. The first nerf is to Tailwind. Tailwind is a stacking buff which grants you increased movement speed, skill speed, evasion rating, and that with 10 stacks. The evasion rating of 15% is nerfed to 10%. That's a 50% loss of evasion rating. And the skill speed is down to 2% instead of 3. That's 10% skill speed down the drain. However, Tailwind will still be absolutely fantastic. What they took out though is the Wind Ward. So we're not getting the 30% damage reduction that Tailwind could provide. That's a bummer. Then they're changing Called Shots and Bullseye to need each other. So first we get to go into Called Shots to put on these automatic marks, and then we can put further points into Bullseye for the bonus critical weakness when we're consuming a mark. However, that critical weakness is now bumped up to 10 critical weakness instead of just 5. The best thing they're adding though is the Mirage Deadeye meta skill. This one will function like Mirage Archer. Currently, Mirage Archer says you dodge roll, and then you create a Mirage that you can socket projectile skills in, and it will shoot them out for a couple of seconds with less damage. The Mirage Deadeye skill is different. You socket in a ranged attack skill, and that ranged attack skill triggers of you using a projectile skill yourself. Which means I'm simply running around, I shoot my explosive shot, and instantly there would be a Mirage created that also uses explosive shot or gas grenade. Explosive, whatever I feel like. So I could just go around explosive shooting and then even more explosive shooting, and I don't even have to time my dodge rolls perfectly like you have to do with the Mirage Archer. Nah, I can just be zooming, shooting, and even more zooming and shooting. And we don't even know if it's going to get the same damage penalty, uptime, whatever, which makes current Deadeye builds that were already strong even stronger despite the loss of attack speed due to the Tailwind nerf. And a slight note to our favorite Lightning Deadeye that a lot of people have been playing with Lightning Arrow, the Lightning Rod got nerfed. It's now 10 instead of 20, which means less spamming of it, probably a bit slowing down during leveling, should still be firing the endgame, especially as the lightning arrow now converts even more physical over to lightning damage. That being said, for the Deadeye, I can only recommend picking up a crossbow, going for explosive shot, automatic reloads while heavy stunning, and then just go away, zoom over the map. It's brilliant. What Pathfinder and Deadeye make for good druids though, I do believe Deadeye could be a very nifty wyvern, as there are some projectile attacks, you can get bonus projectiles, and the Pathfinder obviously allows us to just take whatever points we need from anywhere in the board to boost what we're doing. Plus an intriguing damage boost. Should work well for either animal form. Next up, the Amazon, which got the Elemental Surge slightly reworked. Amazon is still all about those open weaknesses, getting massive skill speed bonus, then critical hit chance out of your access chance to hit, with now a change to the Elemental Surge. Elemental Surge says, grants your weapon surges, non-melee projectile attacks with that weapon consume surges to cause the projectile fire to explode at the end of their flight. Currently, I need to consume power, endurance, and frenzy charges to get the respective elemental surge. This is now changed that consuming a charge gives you a lightning surge. So not the other two, only a lightning surge. And then the surging avatar, the second part, gives you triple surges on consuming a charge. Which means if we only want to do lightning shenanigans, like a super lightning spear 3.0, we could easily do that and just murk everything. And since Elemental Surge is all about consuming charges, Wyvern could be crazy, because Wyvern needs to consume power charges for a lot of her attacks, and the Wyvern can create power charges. Very easy with the Wing Blast and or the Devour so far. Seems like a perfect match to me. However, I also do have an Amazon for you with a crossbow that absolutely shreds bosses into nothingness, and the crossbow we're using is the Rampart Raptor for 1 Exalted. This brings us to the Ritualist, and honestly, the buff is actually massive to the Ritualist. I never considered playing it, because the Ritual Sacrifice was so short. Ritual Sacrifice is that skill for 2 passive points that allows you to sacrifice the corpse of rare monsters to grant you its modifiers for a duration, or you sacrifice 20% of your maximum life and grant a random monster modifier. This lasts currently for 20 seconds, not even worth the effort. This goes up to 120 seconds plus 20 seconds from quality. Damn. I mean, you're going to use this and then you're good for the next 2+ minutes. On top, they buffed the Blood Boil. Now enemies around you will periodically get those blood boils that then spreads corrupted blood. However, anyone affected by a blood boil takes 15% more damage. And that's a multiplier. Pretty good. With then the ability to equip another ring and also increase the bonus of rings and amulets. Ritualist really becomes that class to play with whatever you want. You want to go for a mercenary? Pop off, son. You want to be a wyvern, a bear, or a wolf? Why the hell not? Sure, you're starting on the right side, and if you would like to have something from the left, that's going to be quite a travel. However, the right side is also full of attack damage and other shenanigans that you don't even need to go away from here. Next, let's take a peek at our Warbringer. And Warbringer has been absolutely crazy with the fissures and the totems, plus the spirits that you're getting out of it. I mean, it's been an absolute ultra staple. And good news, they already buffed Volcanic Fissure to actually deal more attack damage. It'll just get better. And they boosted the Imploding Impacts, which says you can break enemy armor to below 0. It now does say that you do bonus damage against armor broken enemies as well. So pretty much you break armor equal to 10% of any hit damage you deal, you can break that below 0 and then do bonus damage to the target that has their armor broken. Yeah, love that. They also improved the slam from one of the summons that wasn't slamming enough. This truly lifts the Warbringer up to be even more deadly than it has ever been before. Totems are great. We're now getting spell totems too. And those spell totems will work with the +1 maximum number to summon totems, because these are any totems, not just like the note down here that says melee attack skills have +1 number to maximum summon totems. And we get easy access to any druid note we might need, or spell stuff if we play spell totems. This brings us to the Titan, which might be the best Bear Druid Ascension. Because Bear Druid is all about slams, and we have Earthbreaker, which has 25% chance for slam skills you yourself use to cause aftershocks. On top, we get that 50% increased effect to small passive skills, which can always be fire for whatever we get up here in the Druid board that we might want to take. Lastly, they added a new node called Mountain Splitter. Every third slam slams more to the side and to the front. This is a massive buff to existing warrior builds, whatever you've been doing before with it. And on top, if you now would like to play a bear form and go for his slams, yeah, match made in heaven. And since we're at the warrior class, Smith of Kitava is now even cooler. First and foremost, Heat of the Forge with Fire Spell on hit might finally be good. In the current patch, there's not a single good skill that can be used with Fire Spell on hit, apart from the Solar Orb with Font of Rage granting you rage. And that was more gimmicky than actually useful. You couldn't really jump around and do fireballs. It's like, There are just no really nifty, amazing skills. However, and on top, you had some problems with scaling that spell damage. Now, what they did to Heat of the Forge is that the spell on hit gets 10% more damage per gem level, all the way up to level 20, 200% increased damage. And the Druid is giving us Volcanoes. Now, the Volcano is a channel skill, but you don't actually have to channel it, right? You could just go boop Volcano. Only that channeling makes it more potent. So if I could now leap around and poop out Volcanoes, in case we are able to put this in, and or any other elemental skill that the Druid might get, because we don't know about the other skills, right? We have Entangle, Thunderstorm, and Spell Totem, but there might be even more fire-based skills that then can finally be used with the Smith of Kitava. The second buff to the Smith is to the Smith Masterwork. Now every node you take down here adds 200 armor. They did remove the resistance nodes though, but they also added two amazing new ones. The Kitavan Imprint that increases the glory gain by 60%, and the Tribute of Utula, which says you have 30% more spirit. And considering that we have the node up here that says unlimited number of summoned totems, totems reserve 75 spirit each, we might consider that some spirit playstyles might be nifty and the node could actually become somewhat good. This brings us over to the Infernalist, and I'm not entirely sure how strong the buff is. Currently, you get Seething Body. While in High Infernal Flame, you and allies in your presence gain 50% damage as fire damage. This gets now changed to Elemental Arcane instead of a straight 50% bonus. And all of the Arcane skills up here, Flame Arcane, Ice Arcane, and Lightning Arcane, are now combined into Elemental Arcane. And these Arcanes say, Flame Arcane is a type of Arcane buff, 25% more fire damage with spells, that's a multiplier, converts elemental damage with spells to fire damage, and cannot deal non-fire damage with spells. Spells have more flammability magnitude. However, this is now going to be a triple stack, right? So all three together, and you permanently have it up as you then stay on High Infernal Flame. It does sound pretty cool for a multi-elemental caster, especially since we have now Thunderstorm, Elemental Storm, Firestorm. Could we do something with that? And we have a new support gem that also has Storms Travel With You that we have seen in the preview. Infernalist sounds cool. Second Witch Ascendancy, the Blood Mage, is simply still OP. They added Whispers of the Flash now prevents life regen on enemies. Whispers of the Flash is the one that says enemies you curse have at least 15% of life reserved. Not bad, they can't even regen now anymore. However, the real interesting part is often Blood Barbs, together with then the Gore Spikes for the bonus critical strike damage bonus, and also the base critical hit of spells is 15%. Now, Blood Barb says bleeding you inflict on cursed targets is aggravated, and elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude, which means the more elemental damage you do, the more bleeding you do right now. This could work plenty well for human form or for Wyvern elemental bleed. What we did try out last season was using Lightning Spear, together with Bleed and Poison for zooming over the map and exploding everything, and it worked pretty nifty, especially again with all the new passive nodes being added that might finally boost Bleed. We've been waiting for that now for 2 patches. Now to the very interesting part, Stormweaver, because we get Multiplying Squalls with +2 to Elemental Limit. Multiplying Squalls needs you to put in 4 passive points to then get that Elemental Limit. However, you would also get the Elemental Storm skill, and this would mean we can do more Volcanoes without overabundance, because the Volcano limit is 1. We could also do more Thunderstorms, because the Thunderstorm limit is also 1, and though Thunderstorms could travel with us, Plus, for all I care, we could add a triple firestorm on top that follows us around as well. Could be an interesting calamity kind of playstyle. Other notable buffs: with Storm Recollection, you now collect remnants from further away, and with Refracted Infusion, you are guaranteed to make different elemental infusions as you pick up elemental infusions. That used to be a 50% chance, now it's guaranteed. Chronomancer kinda has fallen out of favor. However, it did receive a good damage buff. Chronomancer got the Inevitable Agony Curse. This curse says, curse all targets in an area, and after a short delay, causing a portion of damage they take from hits to be tracked by the curse debuff, and then they take that damage again. This at level 18 is currently at 32% damage. And the buff goes straight to 50%. Boom. That's it. Super boost. For the Gemling Legionaire, we get Thaumaturgical Infusion and Thaumaturgical Dynamism. With the infusion, you get maximum cold, fire, and lightning resistance if you play the respective blue, red, green support gems. The amount of gems needed for 1% is down to 3 from 4, which makes it easier to get more max resistance. And the Advanced Thaumaturgy gives you charges, and that's now every 5 seconds instead of 8 seconds. And since the Wolf, Bear, and Wyvern each need charges, either Endurance, Power, I don't know, was it Frenzy on the top here for this one? They like to have charges, right? Doesn't sound bad to get free charges every X seconds. And more quality to skills can never go wrong. This brings us to a good old friend, the Tactician, and Tactician is going to be hyper nasty. Crossbow is generally going to be hyper nasty because they're buffing Siege Cascade. They give it 100% more damage against immobilized enemies. Base. Currently, you only get that from Siege Cascade if you quality it up with 80% more damage against immobilized enemies. However, that 80% is being nerfed down to 40% more damage. But that makes in total 140% instead of 80% more damage against immobilized targets. And with the Tactician having all your projectile damage build pin, well, you're always going to immobilize that enemy. They did also buff the Unleash Hell's supporting fire. Death from above is now stronger than ever by making the volley wider, adding more volleys, and making the time between volleys faster. It's now 0.75 seconds instead of 2 seconds. I still don't think supporting fire is going to be good. What's going to be really interesting is the new strategic embankment, because the auras got changed. The Artillery Ballista no longer grants 40% increased immobilization buildup. It gives you 20% increased skill speed if you have one close to you and to each other. And the Artillery Ballista playstyle was already crazy. The Siege Ballista used to give 50% increased damage against immobilized enemies. Increased is additive. That's changed now to 25% more damage against immobilized enemies. Multiplicative. I put one of these just next to me while I already shoot out my Siege Cascades. Well, another 25% on top. Mortar Cannon is now 25% damage as extra fire damage, and a Spell Totem aura is added as well for 50% increased critical hit chance. Hey, yum. Quite nifty. All of them. Embankment aura was already worth it, and now it's double worth it. However, you always got to consider if it's worth it to really go for the embankments, as you might get a totem bonus, yes, but skills used by totems have more skill speed, and they only shoot if you shoot. So you got to actually blast away to have your totems blasting away. It is fun though. Totem playstyles with a mercenary work wonders. With the Tactician, work well the Shapeshifter. The pin is certainly interesting for the Wyvern, however, it only works for the projectile damage you do. What's more intriguing would probably be a solid plan. Persistent buffs have 50% less reservation. That means I could really mix and match whatever I want, including some of the more expensive ones like Elemental Conflux, as I do different elemental damage like fire and lightning with the Wyvern, for example, and you get Frost, probably in Lightning 2 on the Werewolf, Fire, Lightning, Frost maybe on the Bear. So Elemental Conflux that costs 100 Spirit down to 50 Spirit. Nifty consideration for our friend here. The final Mercenary Ascendancy, Witchhunter, get a massive boost to defense. You get yourself Sorcery Ward, and currently Sorcery Ward protects you from elemental damage from hits. And then you get yourself Ceremonial Evolution that says 50% increased effect of Sorcery Ward. Well, this has changed now, and has Sorcery Ward also help with physical and chaos damage, which is the absolute triple stack super defense. Plus, they buffed Witchbane. It's now 30% of the enemy's maximum life instead of 40% of the enemy's maximum life. That is their concentration, which makes it easier to break. That sorcery ward buff, together with the 100 passive skill points become weapon set skill points, you could do some crazy stuff with the different animal forms, human forms, whatsoever on a druid, really swapping around. Kind of like what we see on the Witchhunter. Off to the Invoker and our Monk, and I sadly have to say something about Hollow Palm nerfed. Hollow Palm is the staple skill everyone used with the Monk last season, and it allows you to fight without weapons. And one of the strongest part was 1% more attack speed per 25 item evasion rating. This is nerfed and is now per 75 item evasion rating. However, the base unarmed attack time is now 1.65 per second instead of 1.4. I seriously don't know how this will math out in the end if we are the same or less, but it does sound like a nerf. Gotta just log in with my Monk on the patch and see how does it feel now. However, the Invoker itself get better defenses. The note, and protect me from harm, physical damage reduction from armor is based on your combined armor and evasion rating. 50% less evasion rating is now 35% less evasion rating, allowing you to match those better for defense if you wish to. And they also buffed the Unbound Avatar, which needs you to gather that Unbound Fury by inflicting elemental ailments on enemies. However, with a hit on an enemy, no more than once every 0.2 seconds, it counted the elemental ailments. That is removed and will make Fury stacking easier. Also, meta skills have 50% better reservation. With the Soulspring Eternal that already has meta skills gain 35% more energy. This means we're looking at a potential cast on playstyle, cast on ailment, critical, dodge, reapers, elemental invocation, whatever, anything that actually requires energy gained, any meta skill, can easier be equipped with that reservation. Maybe a Werewolf Bell build could be something you pull off, because Werewolf has Frost, is freezing a lot. That would work together with your Unbound Fury stacking, and you could summon the Bell of the Monk to then strike it potentially with those meta skills to spread more ailments from the Bell outwards too. Invoker seems nice, and the Acolyte of Chayula also seems stronger. The Embrace Darkness is now 10 stacks per darkness instead of 8. The Into the Breach is double the leech now, and Void Illusion get buffed by making it actually work, because Void Illusion was more or less non-functional last patch. A lot of Chayula players have been complaining. How good this all will turn out to be, I cannot really gauge, because I never played the Acolyte of Chayula. It's one of the Ascendancies I never touched, the others I did. Good, that brings us to our friend the Shaman and the Oracle, plus then the potential cool builds that we could do. Shaman is the one I am looking forward to. Let's start from the left over to the right. You get Sacred Flow, gain 40 spirit for each available empty charm slot. That's another 120 spirit bonus, which work nicely with minion stuff, and there is quite a lot of minion stuff on the side of the druid already, and you get easy access to all the minion stuff in the witch area. Plus, it could work for totems with the Ancestral Bond. I mean, another 120 spirit plus, then with a Chespy spirit and whatever offense spirit, and suddenly we're sitting there being able to spam spell totems or whatsoever like crazy. Next one is Wisdom of the Mage, which says gain benefits of additional bonded modifiers on runes and idols. This simply gives runes and idols bonus stats. It's the least interesting one of the druid. We would rather be looking at the bottom one here, Druidic Champion. Every 2 rage grants 1% more spell damage, together with the upper one, which gives us more maximum rage and has our rage automatically regenerate and our mana regeneration giving us more rage regeneration. But skills, which are not default attacks, your basic attacks, cost 5 rage to use. It's a trade-off. However, you could be going absolutely bonkers with 45 rage, bonus damage, spelling your enemies down, and or then actually using the Apocalypse on the side that we'll get to. But first, the bonus defense that Shaman could gain with the reactive growth, that is the node right here where the mouse is hovering. Take 4% less elemental damage per adaptation, matching the adaptation's type, and you gain 1 adaptation when hit by elemental damage, matching the type of the damage taken. I get hit by fire, I get more fire resistance. I get hit by ice, I take less damage from ice. This leads into the Avatar of Evolution. 5% of physical damage taken is as cold, fire, lightning. Then adaptations have a duration of 10 seconds, and we take 4% less elemental damage per adaptation. So that would be 8% total less damage per adaptation. Quite some nasty defense boosts. However, you do have to get hit for that instead of just blasting your enemies away and just avoiding getting hit in general. The final interesting one on the right side would be the Apocalypse, and sadly we're missing this node, so we don't know what it does. Apocalypse is going to be a skill that triggers comets, meteors, everything around you like crazy, ice raining from the sky, if you do enough elemental damage to your opponents, which works really well for the Wyvern. However, the question stands, how would we scale that damage of a spell if we now would focus on a Wyvern or a Bear and doing our actual melee damage on attacks? You do have Druidic Champion, but is that really enough to make Apocalypse worth it? Or is Apocalypse just scaling like crazy and it doesn't actually need bonus spell damage to go good? So far, Shaman definitely looks like what I would like to do with my Wyvern, and it also looks like something I want to do with either a minion build on the Spirit and or a potential totem build on the Spirit. We definitely will want to mess around with the rage gain though, because this is super interesting, getting the maximum rage and then having your rage regenerate automatically. Maybe we can make it that we always have maximum rage and never really run out of things. It is intriguing, so to say, definitely. Then we get the Oracle, and the Oracle is a more multi-purpose tool for other builds than just Druid itself. First, you get insane defense with the Lesser Harm. Enemy critical hit chance against you is unlucky, and damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky. Unlucky means you're going to roll a die twice, and you're going to take the worst outcome every single time, which is a very good defense. Then we get increased critical hit chance and inevitable critical hits, which probably means that we're more or less guaranteed to critical strike. The only reference we have to inevitable critical is our support gem that says supported skills gain 25% increased crit hit chance each second up to 200%. This is lost whenever skills supported by inevitable critical hits. Maybe the forced outcome does this passively to whatever we do. The second node here is sadly not available. However, the one before it says spell cast by totems and attacks used by totems have increased cast speed. So I'd assume that this node here is something to do with totems. The bottom one next to it grants the skill Moment of Vulnerability, which says if the enemy is ready to get stunned, frozen, or whatever, you can create a copy of them and then blast damage on both. It seemed a bit weird in the preview, could turn out to be powerful, and definitely works just simply for every build. The middle one is Align Fate, and Align Fate also works for every build. It shows a mirage copy of you that's using a certain skill, and if you use the same skill, you get more damage. The intriguing part here will be if I use Align the Fate with a minimal amount of skills possible, right? I just don't actually use any skills. I use like one or two of them, and I always see a premonition of myself with one of the two skills. Like I only play Siege Cascade, I remove everything else from my skill bar, so I'm going to see a copy of me that always uses Siege Cascade. Could be nifty. On the bottom, we get Traveler's Wisdom. Non-keystone passive skills in medium radius of allocated keystone passive skills can be allocated without being connected. Reads complicated. Simply what that means is that I can take Zealot's Oaths, and then I can, for example, just put a point in here, or there, or here, without having to be connected to it. Same goes for the Pain Attunement, and then I can just choose Molten Being. Just like that. And this is going to get double interesting with the last node, Unseen Path. Walk the paths not taken, which gives another 130 passive nodes to the Druid that will also be closely allocated to the keystones, which again simply allows me to pick one of those keystones and then make sure that I can take those nodes easy without investing too many points. Right now, looking at the Oracle, it doesn't actually vibe with me as a shape-shifting class thingy, as I have to play it as the Druid. It's more like, what can I do with a mercenary crossbow playstyle? If I throw grenades and then I can throw bonus grenades, or if I use explosive shot and I get the Align the Fate bonus explosive shots, if I use the Moment of Vulnerability and I spam 5 explosive grenades on someone, where I have my mortar totems go for the shrapnel shots, and then with Moment of Vulnerability, I have the opponent just get a second one and then both take damage, plus inevitable critical hits. Yeah, I don't actually see this as a Druid. I see this as everything else, while the Shaman seems more Druidic to me by nature. and I would like to play it with my Wyvern, or my Bear, and or my Werewolf. Before we get to the potential builds that we cooked up, if I would now have to choose one, if I wanted to push, if I wanted to blast, and didn't really care for having fun, I would probably return back to my Deadeye, and then just simply play my Explosive Shot Mercenary. Because I know how powerful it is, and the Mirage Deadeye meta skill makes it only stronger. Might even be considering to play Called Shots for the 10 critical weakness and just go absolutely off the charts. However, we put some interesting builds together. First, I want to play Wyvern Druid with Shaman, Ascendancy, and Apocalypse. That sounds great. Then we get a Bear Slam Warrior with a Titan or Smith of Kitava. Titan obviously for the bonus slams. Smith of Kitava would be for that fire spell on hit we talked about if it works like that. They did also buff Hailstorm rounds for the Deadeye and or Tactician. Hailstorm rounds are crazy. They have twice the capacity now, and they showed it actually in the preview going bonkers. Siege Cascade get buffed, which works really well on Amazon with critical strikes on that more immobilized damage bonus, and or with the Tactician. Both could heavily profit from the Siege Cascade. We get Explosive Spear Blood Mage, potentially for the Elemental Bleed Ignite Poison combo, because Explosive Spear actually get massively buffed. We get a Totem Volcano Warbringer Shaman, because Fissure Warrior get buffed. However, what instead of boosting my fissures, I make a volcano, and that volcano will have totems around it that then slam the volcano. Could that work too? We want to make a bleed build, whatever bleed build in this case, because we're hoping for bleed nodes, and a poison build. Poison Grenade was already powerful, and now with the Pathfinder being buffed, it will be even more powerful, and we might get new passive nodes. Then we get an Infernalist with High Inferno Flame Elemental Arcane for human form Druid, because you have the different elemental forms. You have the Lightning Storm, you have your volcanoes, and whatever spells we're getting might work out very well. And then lastly, a Fissure Maze Bear Slamming Warbringer Titan Shaman. Something like that. We're going to use Fissure, but then instead of slamming the fissures with the totems, you're going to use the bear form, right? And slam those fissures as a bear. Maybe that could work too. There was even a unique for that turns into a demon bear. What do you say, ladies and gentlemen? What would be a class, a build, something you would like to try out now with the new patch? Tell me in the comments below, and then go over watch this video. It has even more information for you.